and welcome to my channel. My name is Brianne Beebe. I am a high school math teacher, and today we are talking about how to set up your classroom. So today's video is actually in response to a question that I received. If you ask me a question, I love to answer it right away, but sometimes we need a whole video just to get everything out there. So that's where we are today. Before we get deep into the advice, I just wanted to share that don't stress over trying to get your classroom to be completely perfect before school starts. It's not a realistic expectation. And I hope that that's not an expectation that's being placed on you by your school. In preparing for this video, I really had to think back to when I first got my classroom, because at this point I've been in the same classroom for 10 years and I don't want to jinx anything, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. And it took a few years for me to get everything set up exactly how I like it. And there's still been changes here and there afterward, but I just want to stress that it does not have to be perfect. When I started in my school, I couldn't get to my classroom until the first day of professional development, and we end up with 4 days of professional development in total. There's a weekend in between, but it's a 3-day weekend for Labor Day, so I only got one extra day that wasn't professional development. So yeah, in between all those meetings and everything, I was trying to get my classroom set up. I had to stay late, and I just want to stress that you're likely not going to get an ideal situation where you just have all this time to set up your classroom, and that's okay, because you don't need that time either. Like I said, we don't want or need to have our classroom be perfect and completely set up for that first day of school. I just want to kind of relieve that pressure a little bit. So it might take a while for you to get your classroom set up as you like it. If you think about when you moved into your home, how long did it take you to unpack and get everything set up, and you had to live in the space a little bit to really get a sense of what your needs were and how to best achieve it. So just keep that in mind. I just want to take that pressure off. Okay, so here we go. Let's get started with the real advice on what to do. First, focus on the flow of your classroom, and by flow, we're really talking about that furniture arrangement. Where are you going to put student desks or tables? Where are you going to put your desk? What other furniture do you have in the classroom that you need to make sure you plan for? And this is easier said than done. There's a lot to consider here. Priority number one, though, needs to be safety. Can people enter and exit your classroom safely? Can they move about your classroom safely? And then unfortunately, we have to talk about if you're having an active shooter drill or, heaven forbid, an actual event. You need to make sure that you have a plan for that and how your furniture facilitates all of those things. So for example, a couple years ago, I really wanted to move my teacher desk to a different place in my classroom, and I couldn't because it actually would have been in the way of where our active shooter or emergency procedure takes place. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, but also I don't want to share what my school's plans are online. That's dangerous. So if you are creating any similar content, be wary of that. I'm just throwing that out there. So you want to be careful about how you set up your classroom. Like I said, safety is number one. You also want to consider how the setup of your classroom will facilitate the activities of your classroom. And here I'm talking about how are you gonna put your student desks together. So it's common in high school classrooms to have the rows. There's just so many different variations of rows. You could have 2 students together, and that's great if you do a lot of partner work. I have individual desks. I have mine set together at tables, and that allows them to share supplies. It allows them to collaborate, work together in groups. So I really love having the desks come together to meet or make tables. So if that's something that makes sense for you, go for it. If the rows make sense for you, go for it. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is a big job. It is for sure easier said than done. I have a nice rectangular classroom. Sometimes you get classrooms that are a really funky shape, so it's kind of hard to make it work. And again, I just want to reiterate that you might have to play with this over the years before you find something that you really like and really love. So furniture is a big piece, but the next thing to really consider as you're setting up the flow of your classroom are zones. And by zones, we just mean where are the spaces going to be that serve different purposes. So when you're setting up your zones, you want to consider the accessibility and frequency. So for example, my classroom has 4 main zones. One zone is for student supplies, another zone is just for me, and then there's 2 zones that are just for basically storage. So in the student supply zone, my students need to be able to access that area, and they need to access it every single day. So I made it really easy for them to get to. It is basically a bookshelf. It's a cube organizer. It's another way you might refer to it, that is on their way into the classroom right next to the door. So that way they're passing it every single day, and it's really easy for them to get to. I make sure to put a good amount of space around it so that students don't get quite stuck there trying to gather and put away supplies. I mean, it's going to happen because, you know, it's a classroom. It's not the biggest space in the world, and this is not the biggest organizer, but I at least try to like keep the student desks not too close to it. I phrased that funny, but hopefully you catch the drift there. So there's a good amount of space. The other zone that I really had to consider was my zone, where I have my teacher desk and any supplies or basically anything I don't want students to have access to. So that's all in my desk, behind my desk. And on the first days of school, I'm communicating with students, you don't go here. This is just for me. There's nothing back there for you. And then my other 2 zones are basically dedicated to supply storage. So one of the zones is just open shelving, and that's where I keep things that I don't need to access frequently. And I also had to give thought to if students were able to get into the stuff here, like would it cause any issues? So I put stuff there that wouldn't interest them. Like I kind of try to think it out. And then there is this one section of open shelving where it's really just supplies for them. Like if they run out of notebooks, I have a notebook. If they, you know, need a binder, folder, whatever, I have some extra stuff there for them. They don't know that that's what it's for, but it's there. So, you know, if they said I need this, I said go over there and just go grab one, it's fine. And then the 4th zone, again, it's still supply storage, but it's a locking cabinet. So this is where I'm going to keep my purse, my coat, and everything during the school day, because I don't want students to have access to that either, obviously. But it's also because it's next to that bookshelf when students come in. That's also where I'm holding supplies that would go onto that bookshelf, so that they're right next to each other. So that's an easy flow for me when I'm going from supplies that need to come out to students and get put away. So I hope that made sense. If there's something that's not clear, just ask in the comments and I'll be happy to reply. Another thing to consider in your classroom is your boards. Whether it's a chalkboard, marker board, smartboard, where is that in the classroom? It's gonna affect things. Like my student desks are all arranged so that students from anywhere in the classroom can see the smartboard where, you know, most of the lessons are taking place, or where they are expected to look for announcements. Next to the smartboard, I have an assignment board, so that's where they can see the objective that I'm required to post. There's important information there too, as far as assessments coming up or just special events. And if they have homework, that's all up there on that board. Who's missing assignments is on that board. And that was, I think, the last big change I had in my classroom. That board used to be like on the side wall, but instead of being in the front. So it was kind of a chore to like always direct students, like look at this board, look at this board. Now it's right next to the smart board where they're already facing, so it's a lot easier for them to see that. So hopefully, I can't, you know, make any promises, but hopefully in your school you're able to move those things around. There's also the just issue of you're probably limited. Like if you have windows, you can't put a board there, or if your wall's only so big. I know that you can't always put things exactly where you want them. And I know some schools that might say, nope, that's just where it is and you're just gonna have to deal with it. So either way, whatever your situation is, just know that that's something to plan for. Whatever board you're using as like the main spot for your students to look, you want to make sure that their desks are arranged in a way that they're going to easily be able to see that. And then just as a note, I still have like a nice long board on the side wall, and it's right above where students gather their supplies. So if I have an announcement that I want them to see before class, I kind of put it on the board, like right above their supplies. Doesn't mean that they see it, but at least it's there. And that's kind of where I keep bulletin type things. Like if there's some kind of a flyer that my school wants us to put up, I'll put it up on that board. I have emergency procedures on that board, the schedule for the bell and all that. So I keep stuff like that over there, as well as some anchor charts. And one last note on boards, if you have those chalkboards or marker boards that are staying exactly where they are, just try to determine a purpose for each one. Like I said, I have one board that's used for assignments. I have another board that has like bulletins or anchor charts or whatever on there. I have another board at the front of the room, and that's where I'll put like big announcements, like, you know, some kind of events going on. That's also where I leave my students like notes about what they're doing if I'm out for that day. So try to have an idea of what each board's function is, and that makes it easier to, again, set up your classroom and figure out where things are going to go in relation to those boards. Overall, as you're setting up your classroom, you really want to consider your systems, which, like your classroom, they should evolve over time, so don't stress yourself out trying to get it all perfect right away. But I have a checklist that's available for free. I'll have it linked below, but it's a list of systems that you want to have in place and planned out intentionally so that they can save you time and have your classroom kind of run itself a little bit. So there is one section in particular, that would be your systems to teach students, that really can be facilitated by how you set up your classroom. I'm going to read out the ones that I noted as being like the most important as far as setting up your classroom goes. So as you're setting up your classroom, think about systems for how you want students to enter and leave the classroom. Systems for throwing away garbage, like you need a procedure for that. I know it feels like we shouldn't, but like students have to be taught that, you know, throwing, like literally throwing garbage across the classroom, trying to make baskets is not appropriate. And then another note, multiple garbage cans in different places in your classroom help a lot with students being able to throw away garbage. Think about like an amusement park, especially Disney World is famous for this. They have strategically placed garbage cans, and it makes it so that you don't see garbage. Hopefully. I haven't been to Disney World in a long time, but that's what I've heard. Other systems to teach students is how they access their pencils, missing supplies, absent work, extra copies. Having that be part of how you set up your classroom is important, as well as gathering and returning supplies. Another one that's kind of loaded because we all have such different situations and I can't give like very specific advice, is how computers are set up in your classroom. I don't know if you like have physical computers actually sit there anymore, if all students are one-to-one. That's what I mean by it's kind of loaded, because we all have these different situations. But if you have a spot for your students to charge their device, if it's one-to-one, just making sure that that's something that's easy for them to access is important. So just keep that in mind. And then just how they turn in any assignments that they have. It's another thing to consider when you're thinking about the overall flow of your classroom. And last but not least, we need to talk about decor. I will link below a blog post I did about decorating for a high school classroom and kind of what my experience was. But I just remember there was this one year, because I always took everything down and put it back up in between the years. I don't do that anymore because I have it how I like it. But when I was still figuring stuff out and changing things every year, there was this one year where I was like, is this even worth it? Like, why am I doing this to myself? And then that first day of school, I had my former students come back to say hi, and they're like, we love this classroom. We just miss being here. And part of it, they said, was that it's just like so bright and happy, and you know, that there's decor on the walls. So it's one of those weird things, and it depends on who you talk to, how they feel about it as teachers. Some teachers love decor and other teachers are like, it shouldn't be a thing. So wherever you stand, I support you. You always do what's best for you and your students. But overall, when it comes to decor, if you are a decor lover like I am, just remember not to go overboard. You can do too much. You don't need to have every bit of your walls covered in decor. It can be overstimulating for students, and that can actually detract from their learning environment. So just be strategic. What is most important? You want to kind of prioritize what it is that you're putting up on your walls. And if there's a way that you can switch the decor out as you see fit, that's probably even better in terms of minimizing what's on the walls. So for example, I have one large bulletin board on one of the walls in my classroom, and on that bulletin board I put up information from geometry. So I have bulletin board sets for every unit of geometry that I teach, and what I do is as I change from one unit to another, I swap out what's on that bulletin board, and that works really well for kind of keeping everything contained. Like, here's this one board to look at when you're looking for help in geometry. That's just made it really easy so my students know where to direct their attention. But with decorating, it's most important that you are prioritizing its function over just being cute. Now, the only thing I feel like I did not address here was actually like the nitty-gritty of how to organize your classroom. It's kind of hard to really go into like specifics, but I do have some videos that might be helpful to you, so I will link those down below. And if you have any further questions, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.